Welcome back. You're live with us tonight. You're in Focus, and thanks for staying on. We turn to this now. Black Sash says that this week's technical glitch that led to thousands of pensioners not being able to get their money is far bigger than Sassa is making it out to be. PostBank has since been warned that it will face a penalty should there be a repeat of the situation. Black Sash Director Rachel Bukasa joins us now for more on this. Rachel, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. As much as I tried to impress it on Paseka Letsatsi yesterday that it was a horrible scene to see pensioners, old people, having to lie on the floor of shopping centers waiting for money to come through on their cards. In vain, by the way, because it did not happen, and some of them had to borrow money to get back into a taxi and go back home, to come back again the next day. And by and large, I'm hearing again, even today, not everyone was able to get all their money. Those who did get their money got parts of it. And because of reversals, is what I'm hearing from PostBank, some of the parts of their monies was not out. What did they say in the meeting today? What was behind this technical glitch?
So, Thabo, I think you're right to impress the seriousness and the gravity of the situation. One of the things we want to highlight is this is not an issue that came up yesterday or the day before yesterday. Black Sash had been receiving reports since Monday, as far back as Monday, as to problems with payments. As far as we've been told, the issue here is that there were systems upgrades to the PostBank IT system in order to ensure that, the system is adequately protected or adequately upgraded, whatever it be, and it caused problems. Black Sash's position is quite simple. Something as big as an IT infrastructure should be something that is in place way before people are due for their grants to get paid. And that if there's any anticipated upgrades or whatever it be, people need to be communicated and people need to be told that this might happen and this would be the circumstances, because what we're seeing on the ground is really dire.
Yeah. Surely today being one of those days where I think the child support grant would have needed to come out, and that is what, 6.3 million people that would need to be paid coming out of that. So it's a huge chunk. It means the system would have been under quite a lot of strain. Did it live up to the test, though, today?
So as of today, we still have people not getting paid. In fact, we were hoping, as of yesterday, there were commitments that things would be up and running, but that's not what we saw on the ground today. So for context, you don't have just the people that were receiving child support grants today, but you have people since the older person's grant, since Monday, all those people still waiting. Some are being helped, but again, as you said, the reversal rate is still quite high, and we still have people who are still at their different payment points waiting for payment 2-3 days on now.
Surely these people should be reimbursed. I mean, if you're saying from Monday, it means it's 4 days of people traveling to points of withdrawals, because most of them don't live near post office, right? So they have to travel to get there, to commute to get there. What is the conversation around some kind of reimbursement for these people?
So over and above that, Black Sash feels that the conversation should be just over and above reimbursement. It's a dignity issue here. It's an issue where you have older persons sleeping on the floor because they can't afford to go back home and then come back the next day. It's a dignity issue of people not being able to purchase food, electricity, and the basic necessities that they need to be able to do that. So over and above the making sure that people do get their full grants, what needs to happen here is, one, an acknowledgement of the fact that people's dignity rights have been impacted in a horrendous way, and the apologies perhaps that follow that, but also an assurance that this is something that cannot happen again. It's one thing for you and me to be expected to run up and down. It's another thing for a 94-year-old and 84-year-old to be expected to pull the same kinds of gymnastics to get their constitutional rights honored in this country.
Yeah, and what currently is the penalty? I mean, Paseka saying yes, there's a service level agreement between themselves and the post office as the service provider, and the only guarantee he can give us is that should this happen again, maybe Sassa might even begin to consider implementing those penalties for, I suppose, breach of agreement.
So that's one of the things where we're wanting to make sure that is clarified in the public domain. It's one thing to say PostBank is at fault as a service provider, but the constitutional obligation to disburse grants sits with Sassa. Right? So we had this issue with the South African Post Office before. That agreement fell, and now they've gone to PostBank, and now guess what? We're having the same problems. One of the things we need to interrogate is, firstly, what's due diligence done before PostBank was given this post? Who signed off on it? Did they make sure that the infrastructure was in place? What steps were taken to ensure that we wouldn't have a repeat of Stapo? Because clearly it wasn't taken, because if it was, now we're suddenly living with a repeat of Stapo, but with a different service provider, that is PostBank. So we've got to get to a place where we draw the line and say that we can't scapegoat service providers all the time, but we've got to put the responsibility where it lays squarely, and that is with Sassa and the Minister of Social Development, with the Minister of DSD. That's where the responsibility lies. It's with them to make sure that people get their grants. If they can't get their procurement in order, perhaps it's worth asking for some support, but that's where the responsibility lies, and we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Yeah. So Sassa says to us that, by the way, they want to remind beneficiaries that they have a right to change service providers. So if they are unhappy with the service that they're getting from the PostBank, he says, well, you must notify us at least, I don't know, is it 10 or 20 days before payments, and you can change and go to a service provider that would give you a little bit of more of a better service.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of, politics these days, where it's about putting the blame on someone else. Where PostBank is to be also blamed, don't get me wrong, their systems failed. But I think it's a chain, and everybody in the chain has to be held to account. It is not sufficient to say, well, change your service provider. Like, I don't understand. Do we know who our demographics are? Some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And all you have to do as these organizations is to get your job correct, so that the other people don't have to now be running around trying to find someone who honor their constitutional obligations. So I think that's a cop-out to say that, and I think that the approach should rather be a dignity-first approach, a human rights approach, where we say to people, we know that you've struggled to do this, we're working on it, and we're going to sort it out. Telling people to go and find another service provider is actually shocking.
And are there any particular care undertakings that you were given today coming out of your deliberations?
So PostBank had made an undertaking both yesterday and today that they're working on this and they're wanting to straighten the issue out. And as well as Sassa's commitment to making sure that they continue to make sure that grants are disbursed in a way that is effective. But even though those undertakings were made, we do know from the ground today that we still had those complications and the difficulties. What we're hoping is that the damage is not too great and that people can recover from this. But I think that serious conversation needs to be had about how to make sure that people don't go through this again. Because I think it's important to highlight, Tabo, that this is not the first time that this has happened. We've had these technical system glitches since PostBank has taken over this contract back in November 2022. So it's one thing to say it's technical glitches, but it's another thing that it's something that keeps being repeated.
All right, and I mean, at what point do you, as Black Sash, because I know in some instances you have considered litigation, but at what point would you look at this and say, well, maybe it's now time for our courts to pronounce on this technical glitch situation that seemingly is not improving?
So look, we've made a concerted effort to make sure that we build relationships with Sassa and PostBank in order to be able to support them in the way they might need in order to get the grants to people who are our constituents on the ground. And I think that commitment remains, but I think in the absence of what we perceive to be as good faith or a good faith commitment to making this work, I think like all organizations, we reserve the rights to approach the courts when we see that people's human rights are deliberately being violated at this point.
Black Sash Director there, Rachel Bukasa, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on and raising this issue yet once again. Of course, one will certainly be watching for some kind of improvements. Otherwise, once again, we'll try and bring those who are responsible to come and account to the people of this nation. More news when we continue next. Stay with us.